Hey folks, this is Trevor Lewis from the Voyager Middle School STEAM Lab. Welcome back. This is a quick video to show you how to do this mystery wheel project using Inkscape. We're going to build this in the wood shop, but my students might need help making these shapes, the shape that they want them to make, by doing it on the computer first, and then we can print those out. We can either laser them directly onto the wood and use that as a guide when we're at the bandsaw or at the router table, or we can print them out on paper and glue them down and then use that as well. So I'm going to show a few techniques. First thing I'm going to point out, there's a variety of different designs here, but you can see if you scroll down here on our assignment, I have these Inkscape tutorials from TJ Free. These are available on YouTube, and this is the full playlist. So if there's something that I'm showing you in Inkscape that you want more about, for example, the Bezier tool and nodes, you can find that in here. One that I noticed way down on the list that might help out is the corners path effect. That might be one to look into for this particular project. So these videos are available for my students. They're right there in the assignment. And we are going to go straight into Inkscape. So here's Inkscape. This is a sheet of paper. It's set to a letter sheet of paper. We are running in millimeters because our laser speaks millimeters as always. But we might want to go back and forth between inches, which we're more comfortable with measuring, and maybe that's what we're used to dealing with when we're dealing with a piece of wood, and going to millimeters, so we don't end up with a piece that's maybe so big that we have to edge glue two boards together or things like that. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So we're going to use some of these drawing tools over here. We're going to use the rectangle tool and the circle ellipse tool a lot. Those two. We're going to use a lot of things in the path menu, like union and difference and things like that. We're going to use a lot of those things. We can also use the Bezier tool. I like the Bezier tool a lot while drawing. The Bezier tool is good because you can draw straight lines or curved lines. If I click and drag, I create a curve. And either of those can be something that we could draw in Inkscape, and then that's also a line that we could cut on a bandsaw. So we're going to start off by we're making this mystery wheel project. We do not need to copy either of these, but you're going to need the components. You're going to need a base, you're going to need an arm to hold the wheel, and you're going to need the circle, the wheel. Okay, so the circle, the wheel, that's pretty much the easiest thing in the world. You're going to use a circle tool. It's going to come out as an ellipse unless you hold control. But after you draw it, you can also adjust right here the X radius and the Y radius. If you make them equal, then it's a circle. If I want to do this in inches, I can just click on the drop down to switch to inches. Don't forget to switch back before you save your DXF file if you're sending it to the laser. Okay. If you're going to print on a printer, make sure it's going to be on the sheet of paper. You can print this in batches as well. So let's say I want a 6-inch wheel. That means I need a 3-inch radius in both dimensions, X and Y. So I can adjust it like that. Then I can keep that and see how everything goes with it. I can move off to the side. I could print it off if I wanted to. I could just cut a 6-inch circle using techniques I'm going to show you in the wood shop. But if I was going to draw the arm that's going to contain this, that arm needs to be tall enough so that the base is not attached. So I might start with a rectangle and just sort of freehand draw it. But if I do that, you can see that I have a width and a height. Again, it's in millimeters. I could switch that. But there's some other techniques that you could use. One of them that I'm doing right now is scrolling in and out. I'm holding down the control key while I scroll with the mouse, and that lets me scroll in and out. If I don't hold down control, it'll just scroll up and down, and if I hold down shift, I'll scroll left and right. We can also use multiple shapes. So I can draw right on top of here. I can draw a circle by clicking and holding down, and I can draw that circle. If I want these two things to match, I could type them in. I could type in and say, okay, so let's say that this circle, the radius is going to be 1 inch, and it doesn't have to be matching, right? Because I could have a circle that is squashed down like this, and that's a curve that we could cut. But then let's also make this rectangle 1 inch wide. So I'm going to switch this to inches as well, and I'm going to set my width here to 1 inch, or no, sorry, 2 inches, because it was a 1 inch radius. So now these are the same width, but you see they're not lined up. So to line them up, the way I like to do it is I would select both of them, and I would go to Object, and I would choose this Align and Distribute here. Align and Distribute lets you take objects and space them out a certain amount, or it lets you line up certain parts of them. So Align Distribute is a really useful thing. You can say relative to last selected, so that means the last thing I selected is not going to move and the other things are going to move, but I can also change this to different areas. This alignment, I can line things up on the left like this, the left of one side lined up with the right of the other, both left sides lined up, centers lined up, which is going to be the same because they're the same width. I can line up the centers vertically. I could line them up in a lot of different ways. So I would probably, let's see, I might do something like this, but then I realize I'm like, oh, actually that's not quite right. What I want is that rectangle to be lower. So I can click on the rectangle now, and if I click and drag it downwards, it's going to misalign. But if I hold the Control key, it's going to stay in that line as I drag down. I can also use the arrow keys to go up and down. If I hold Shift while holding the arrow keys, it's bigger jumps. If I hold Control while I hold the arrow keys, it slides my life up and down there, my whole page. But if I hold Alt, it goes really, really fine, even finer than before. So once I get them lined up, if I hold Shift, I can select multiple objects. And if I choose Path, I can choose Union to turn that into one object. Maybe I want to add a flare outwards here. So maybe I'm going to take my Bezier tool and I'm going to draw that flare in. So I want it to curve, so I'm going to click and drag to start that curve. And I want it to go out parallel to this. So I'm not going to worry about exactly where it is right now. And then I'm going to make sure that I cut it off flat at the bottom. So if I hold Shift while drawing, I'm sorry, you can see right down here where it says Control Snap to Angle, Enter or Shift Enter to finish the path. So if I hold Control, I'm going to go straight. And then if I hold Shift and press Enter, it will close my path. So now I've got that little flute done that way. I can also edit it by going Edit by Node and adjust until it's the shape I want. And once I get it the way I want it, then I can go back to Select and hold Shift, and I can union those things together. You'll notice that I wasn't very careful about what's going on this side, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use symmetry. So one thing I can do for symmetry is I can line this straight up down the middle, and I'm actually going to leave just a little bit extra. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to do it, and then I'll fix it in the other side. By drawing this part around here, this part right here is the part that I like. I want to make a copy of that on the other side. So I'm going to hold Shift here, and I'm going to use Path Difference to cut that part off. So now I can duplicate that. I can do that with a right click and choose to duplicate. And I can flip it right here with this button that will flip it horizontally. And I can use that trick before that I learned where I can hold Control. And I can move it over. Now, some of this you could probably get away with snapping. There's some snap settings that you can set so it'll snap to certain spots, so it'll snap together. But what I like to do is I like to make sure that there's just a little bit of overlap. So I can grab this right here and I can extend it out a little bit to make sure there's a little bit of overlap. And I can select those two things and I can union them. Remember, this is not needing to be perfect because you're going to cut it with a bandsaw, so that's going to be where you're going to have to make things actually line up and be the way you want them to be. But now at least they're symmetric. You can also do things like edit by node and change the node type. So if I click on this node type here, if I find like this node right here is a little sharp for me, this transition, I can come up here and I can make that node smooth. Oops, that did not do what I expected it to do. Oh, there might be two nodes there. Are there two? Or just one? I thought making it smooth would make it... Oh, yeah, it's having a hard time with making it smooth. Huh. Oh, yep, there are two nodes there. That would explain it. Let me delete this node by clicking on it and pressing delete. And now I can click on this node and I can make it smooth, and that would create a smoother transition there. But it might affect things down the line that you might have to look at. Okay, So that was a little bit about drawing things by node. Let me show you one more technique using curved rectangles. So if I just draw a rectangle, by default, the corners are at 90 degrees, but I can just grab that corner with the rectangle tool and add a radius. And if I draw a few of those, I can put them together to make things that are pretty curvy. So if I select these things, I can line them up, I can choose path union, and I could use this to make an arm or a base or something like that. Okay, so the curved rectangles are a way to go. At some point, you would probably need to do an object to path to make sure that those curves exist when you export it. But I think when I unioned those, I actually ended up making it a path as well. All right, so that's just a few of the basics that I wanted to show you that help you come up with some plans. Your shapes do not need to look like these shapes. Your shapes do not need to look like these shapes. You just need a base, an arm, and a wheel. Okay, so good luck, and hopefully we can cut some of these out on the bandsaw. We're going to drill a hole here to insert this. We got a bearing that we're going to put on the back of this. We're going to drill up through the bottom here using the drill press to attach with screws, and then we'll have a finished product.